Russia has launched a blistering critique of the West, accusing the US and NATO of stoking global chaos in their relentless pursuit of dominance. Moscow claims that Western powers are not just fueling the war in Ukraine, but orchestrating conflicts worldwide to enforce what it calls a rules-based international order.
The main reason of escalation is the desire of the collective West led by the USA to preserve their global dominance, continue to implement the so-called rules-based international order, which has no legal basis from the standpoint of international law, by forceful method. Over the past 10 years, we repeatedly drew attention to the growing danger of the transition from the American-led war on terrorism to instigating conflicts and territorial disputes. Today, we see crises being provoked in Europe, the Middle East, Asia, and Africa.
Moscow alleges that this Western agenda has alienated much of the global South, pushing nations in Africa, Asia, and Latin America to rally against US interference. Organizations like BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization are increasingly coordinating efforts to shield their sovereignty and push back against what they see as Western imperialism.
At the same time, there is a growing global awareness of the need to collectively oppose such Western policies. The Global South countries, member states of the SCO and BRICS international organizations, are increasingly coordinating steps to ensure sovereignty and protect national interests.
On the battlefield, Russia claims the tide is firmly in its favor. Gerasimov asserts that Russian forces hold the initiative across the front lines, advancing steadily despite massive Western military support for Ukraine. In a dramatic recounting of its territorial gains, Moscow states that Russian forces have liberated over 190 settlements and captured more than 4,500 square kilometers of land this year alone. At the same time, Ukraine's alleged incursions into Russian territory, such as the failed operation in the Kursk region, have been decisively repelled.
Despite the enormous help from the West, the initiative on the line of contact is in our hands. And Russian troops are conducting an offensive along the entire front. The enemy's losses have amounted to up to 1 million troops killed and wounded, 20,000 tanks and armored fighting vehicles, more than 19,500 field artillery guns, and 1,500 MLRS combat vehicles since the beginning of the special military operation.
Moscow also accuses the US of crossing a dangerous line by enabling Kyiv to use long-range weapons on Russian soil. Gerasimov warns that Washington's actions make it a direct participant in the war, escalating the conflict and raising global risks.
Since the beginning of hostilities in the Kursk region, the enemy's lost more than 42,000 troops, more than 1,800 tanks and armored fighting vehicles, more than 350 artillery guns, mortars, and MLRS combat vehicles. Another round of escalation of the conflict in Ukraine was the authorization by the United States of America and its NATO allies to use their long-range weapon systems on territory deep inside the Russian Federation. In essence, the US has authorized itself to use these systems on Russian territory. The AFU is not able to enter space reconnaissance data on its own, or to ensure the preparation of flight missions for missiles. In fact, after the strikes on Russian territory, the USA became a direct participant in the conflict, which means its escalation.
Amid these mounting tensions, Russia is doubling down on its military readiness. The Zapad 2025 strategic exercise with Belarus is already in the works, signaling Moscow's commitment to defense cooperation with its closest ally. At the same time, Russia is hosting high-level military summits with its international partners, emphasizing its focus on building a united front against Western influence.
Next year, the main training event for the armed forces will be the Joint Strategic Exercise with the Armed Forces of Belarus, Zapad 2025. Within the framework of military and military technical cooperation, the pace of cooperation with foreign military departments continued to increase. At the end of the year, more than 700 significant events were organized.
Yet, in its dramatic accusations, Russia's narrative remains fiercely contested. Western officials argue that their aid to Ukraine is a response to Russian aggression, a defense of Ukrainian sovereignty and territorial integrity. Even as Moscow paints itself as a defender of sovereignty, critics point to its ongoing occupation of nearly 20% of Ukrainian territory and the devastating humanitarian toll of the conflict. As the war drags on, Russia frames the battle as one not just for Ukraine, but for a new global order. Whether through military advances or alliances with the global South, Moscow insists it is challenging what it sees as an unjust Western hegemony.